A cowboy came searching for milk. Black woman breastfed the baby and became the mother he needed. The giant cowboy's calloused hands trembled as he pressed the dying infant against his chest, desperate eyes scanning the horizon for salvation. To the frontier towns, he was nothing but a dangerous drifter, a former slave too broken to trust, too scarred to love, destined to watch everything he touched wither and die, just like his own family years before. But fate would lead him to her doorstep, the grieving widow who had lost her own child just months earlier, whose empty arms ached with the memory of what was stolen from her. When their eyes met across that threshold, neither could imagine that this starving baby carried secrets powerful enough to destroy them both. The infant's true identity would soon draw killers from the shadows, forcing them to choose: flee and lose each other forever, or stand together and risk everything they'd found. Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The baby's cries grew weaker with each passing hour. Ezra Cole pressed the infant closer to his chest as his horse stumbled through the desert sand. 3 days had passed since he found the child among the twisted wreckage of the wagon train. Everyone else was dead. Blood had soaked into the earth around the overturned wagons. Arrows and bullet holes told the story of a swift, brutal attack. But something felt wrong about the scene. Too organized, too thorough. Ezra had seen plenty of raids during his years as a scout. This looked different. He had almost walked away. The smart thing would have been to mount his horse and ride toward the next town, report what he found. Let someone else deal with the aftermath. But then he heard the crying. The baby was hidden beneath his dead mother's body. A woman in expensive clothes with soft hands that had never known hard labor. The child was maybe 4 months old, wrapped in blankets finer than anything Ezra had ever owned. He lifted the boy from the carnage and saw those tiny fingers reach toward him. That was 3 days ago. Now the baby barely moved. Ezra had tried everything. He soaked cloth in water and let the infant suck on it. He mixed water with bits of hardtack, trying to create something the child could swallow. Nothing worked. The baby needed milk, and Ezra had none to give. The sun climbed higher as his horse crested a small hill. In the distance, he spotted a thin line of smoke rising from a chimney. A homestead sat in a valley below, surrounded by a few scraggly trees and a small vegetable garden. It looked modest but well-maintained. Hope flickered in his chest. Maybe whoever lived there would have a cow. Maybe they would help. His horse picked its way down the rocky slope. The baby had stopped crying an hour ago, and the silence terrified him more than the wailing had. Ezra could feel the child's breathing against his ribs, shallow and irregular. He thought about his own son, dead these 5 years now. Little Marcus had been about this age when the fever took him. Ezra's wife, Sarah, had followed 3 days later, her heart simply giving up. He had buried them both in a grove of oak trees outside Millerville and never looked back. The homestead grew larger as they approached. A woman emerged from the small house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was colored like him, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was lined with worry as she watched him ride up. Ezra dismounted slowly, careful not to jostle the baby. The woman stepped back, her eyes narrowing. He knew that look. He had seen it countless times in countless towns. A big man like him, scarred and weathered, riding alone. People made assumptions. "I need help," he said, his voice hoarse from days without much water. "The baby is dying." The woman's expression changed instantly. She stepped forward, her maternal instincts overriding her caution. "Bring him inside, quickly." Her name was Missy May Washington, she told him as she examined the infant. She had been a midwife before moving to this isolated spot. Her gentle hands moved over the baby's small form, checking his breathing, feeling for fever. "When did he last eat?" "I don't know. I found him 3 days ago. His mama was dead." Missy May nodded grimly. She had seen enough death to recognize the signs. The baby's lips were pale, his skin slightly gray. He was slipping away. "He needs milk," she said. "I don't have a cow." Ezra's heart sank. He had ridden all this way for nothing. The baby would die anyway, and he would have to bury another child. He started to turn away, but Missy May caught his arm. "Wait." Her voice was soft but firm. "There might be another way." She disappeared into the back room of the small house. Ezra heard her moving around, opening drawers, searching for something. When she returned, she had changed into a clean dress and washed her hands. "I lost my own baby 4 months ago," she said quietly. "The milk might still come if I try." Ezra stared at her. This woman was offering to nurse a stranger's child. A white child from the looks of him. She was risking her own emotional well-being for someone she had never met. Missy May took the baby gently from his arms. The infant felt impossibly light and fragile. She settled into a rocking chair by the window and began to unbutton her dress. "You might want to step outside," she said. Ezra nodded and walked onto the small porch. He could hear her soft voice through the thin walls, cooing gently to the baby. Then, after several long minutes, he heard something that made his chest tight with relief. The baby was making soft suckling sounds. It was working. He sat on the porch steps and allowed himself to breathe for the first time in days. His horse grazed nearby, finally able to rest. The sun felt warm on his face, and for a moment, he let himself imagine that everything might be all right. But as he looked out across the empty landscape, he wondered who the baby really was. Those expensive clothes suggested wealth. Someone would come looking for him eventually, and when they did, would they understand that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places? The baby's color returned within hours. Missy May sat in her rocking chair, watching the infant's chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. For the first time in months, her arms felt complete. Ezra hovered near the doorway, uncertain whether to stay or go. The child was safe now. His job was done. But something kept his boots planted on her wooden floor. "He needs a name," Missy May said softly. "Probably already has one." "Well, we don't know it." She looked down at the sleeping baby. "I'll call him Samuel, after the doctor in town who helped me when I lost my own." The name settled into the room like it belonged there. Ezra found himself nodding approval. Samuel. It was a good, strong name. That evening, Missy May prepared supper while Samuel slept in a makeshift crib fashioned from a wooden crate. Ezra had intended to leave before dark, but the baby would need feeding again soon. One more night wouldn't hurt. "Tell me about the wagon train," Missy May said as they ate. Ezra described the scene, the scattered bodies, the burned supplies, the way the attack looked too organized for a random raid. Missy May listened without interruption, her face growing more troubled with each detail. "You think someone was hunting them specifically?" "Maybe. Hard to say." After dinner, Missy May examined Samuel's belongings more carefully. The blanket was made of silk, hand-stitched with delicate patterns. His tiny clothes were tailored, not homemade. Even his diaper cloth was finer than most people's Sunday dress. "This baby comes from money," she said. Ezra had reached the same conclusion. Rich folks lose children too. But Missy May wasn't finished looking. Her fingers traced along the blanket's edge, feeling for irregularities. Years of sewing had taught her to notice when fabric didn't lie flat. Near one corner she found what she was searching for, a hidden pocket, sewn so cleverly it was nearly invisible. Inside was a small gold locket, tarnished but expensive. The initials J.H. were engraved on the front in elegant script. Missy May's hands trembled as she opened it. A photograph stared back at them. A well-dressed white family posed in front of a grand house. The man wore a fine suit, the woman an elaborate dress. Between them sat a young boy with the same distinctive birthmark Samuel carried on his shoulder. "Sweet Lord," Missy May whispered. Ezra leaned closer. "That's his family. Was his family. If they were on that wagon train, they're dead now." They stared at the photograph in silence. The implications hit them both at the same time. This wasn't just any baby. This was someone important, someone whose disappearance would be noticed. "There'll be a reward," Ezra said quietly. Missy May closed the locket with a sharp click. Blood money. Money that could change our lives. Both of us. She looked at him sharply. Our lives? The word had slipped out without thinking. Ezra felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had no claim to this woman's life, no right to speak of them as a unit. But something about the last day had felt different, like they were building something together. I just meant, I know what you meant. Missy May's voice was gentler now. Question is, what do we do about it? They talked long into the night. The reward money would be substantial, enough for Ezra to buy land instead of drifting, enough for Missy May to move somewhere with better soil, maybe closer to town. They could build real lives instead of just surviving, but that meant giving up Samuel. He's not ours to keep, Ezra said, though the words tasted bitter. Isn't he? His real family is dead. What's left? Some distant relatives who never knew he existed? An inheritance that'll sit in a bank vault? Missy May had a point. But keeping Samuel meant living with the constant fear of discovery. It meant looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. The next morning brought visitors. Dr. Samuel Gates arrived in his buggy, an elderly white man with kind eyes and steady hands. Missy May had sent word the day before, asking him to examine the baby. Dr. Gates was one of the few men in the territory who treated colored folks with the same respect he showed everyone else. He had delivered Missy May's baby and stayed with her when the child died. She trusted him more than anyone. Healthy as a horse, he pronounced after his examination. Then his eyes fell on Samuel's clothes. These are expensive. We found him that way, Ezra said carefully. Dr. Gates nodded slowly. His expression suggested he understood there was more to the story. Well, whoever he belongs to, he's lucky you found him. Another day without milk and he wouldn't have made it. After the doctor left, Ezra noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh hoofprints circled their property, too close to the house. Someone had been watching them during the night. He followed the trail to a rocky outcrop overlooking the homestead. The prints led to a spot where a rider could observe the house without being seen. Whoever it was had stayed for hours, studying their movements. We're not alone out here, he told Missy May when he returned. She looked out at the empty landscape with new fear in her eyes. What do we do? Ezra checked his rifle and counted his ammunition. His military training from the war came flooding back. Positioning, lines of sight, defensive strategies, skills he had hoped never to use again. We prepare, he said. Dr. Gates returned 2 days later with information that changed everything. He carried a leather satchel filled with newspapers and official documents, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by grim concern. I did some research on those initials, he said, settling into Missy May's kitchen chair. J.H. stands for Jonathan Hartwell, wealthy family from back east. Ezra and Missy May exchanged glances. Samuel slept peacefully in his makeshift crib, unaware that his identity was being unraveled. Jonathan died 6 months ago, Dr. Gates continued, under suspicious circumstances. His wife fled town with their baby shortly after. Said she feared for their lives. Feared who? Missy May asked. His mother, Eleanor Hartwell. She's been searching for that baby ever since. The pieces began falling into place. Eleanor Hartwell owned the general store in town. The elegant woman who asked too many questions about strangers and babies. The one who had arrived in Redemption Creek around the same time the search parties started combing the territory. She's here, Ezra said quietly. In town. Dr. Gates nodded. Been there 3 weeks. Calls herself a grieving grandmother, but something doesn't sit right. She's got men with her. Hard men who don't look like family. That evening, Ezra used skills he had learned during his years as a Union scout. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, studying the watchers who studied them. 2 men had taken position in the rocks above their valley. A third waited with the horses a mile south. These weren't random drifters or opportunistic thieves. They moved with military precision, took shifts like soldiers, communicated with hand signals Ezra recognized from the war. Professional hunters tracking specific prey. He slipped close enough to hear fragments of conversation. Eleanor Hartwell was paying them well. The baby was worth more alive than dead, but not by much. They had orders to eliminate any witnesses and bring the child to town. When Ezra returned to the homestead, he found Missy May awake and waiting. Samuel fussed in her arms, sensing the tension that filled the small house. "What did you learn?" Ezra told her everything. The professional trackers, Eleanor Hartwell's presence in town, the implied threat to their lives. Missy May listened without interruption, her face growing harder with each detail. Why would a grandmother want to hurt her own family? Money, most likely. Rich folks kill for inheritance same as poor folks kill for supper. They spent the next day preparing. Ezra reinforced the doors and windows while Missy May gathered supplies. Her knowledge of local plants proved invaluable. She knew which roots would keep Samuel fed if they had to run, which leaves could treat wounds, which trails would hide their passage. "I worked as a conductor," she told him, as they prepared their escape packs. Ezra stopped hammering and stared at her. Underground Railroad? 17 trips north. Never lost a soul. The revelation explained her calm competence under pressure, her ability to think strategically instead of panicking. Missy May Washington had guided frightened families through hostile territory for years. She knew how to disappear when necessary. On the third night, their watchers made their move. Cole Brennan arrived with 2 companions just after midnight. Ezra had been expecting them, positioned behind the window with his rifle ready. But instead of attacking immediately, Brennan called out from the darkness, "We just want the baby. No need for anyone to get hurt." Ezra didn't respond. He had learned in the war that talking during a standoff usually meant someone was trying to distract you from something else. "Mrs. Hartwell is offering good money. Enough to set you both up comfortable somewhere far away." Missy May crept to the back window. Samuel pressed against her chest. She could see the third man circling toward the rear of the house. They were being surrounded. "She just wants her grandson back," Brennan continued. "Natural thing for a grandmother to want." But Ezra had noticed something in the man's voice. A slight emphasis on certain words. The tone of someone following a script rather than speaking from the heart. Eleanor Hartwell had coached him on what to say. "What happened to his parents?" Ezra called back. Silence stretched across the valley. Then Brennan's voice came again, less smooth this time. "Tragic accident. Indians got them." The lie confirmed what Ezra already suspected. Jonathan Hartwell and his wife hadn't died in a random attack. They had been murdered by the same men who now surrounded his house. A new voice cut through the darkness. Female. Cultured. Eleanor Hartwell stepped into the moonlight near the front porch, her expensive dress oddly formal for a midnight confrontation. "Enough games," she said. "I know you're decent people. You've cared for my grandson, and I'm grateful. But he belongs with family now." Ezra studied her through the window. Eleanor Hartwell was smaller than he had expected, probably 60 years old, with silver hair and soft hands. She looked like someone's beloved grandmother, not a cold-blooded killer. "His parents?" Ezra asked. "Dead. Killed by savages while fleeing from me." Her voice carried no emotion, as if discussing the weather. "My son was weak, threatened to expose certain business arrangements. His wife was foolish enough to believe him." The casual admission hit like a physical blow. Eleanor Hartwell had just confessed to orchestrating her own family's murder. She felt so confident in her position that she didn't bother lying anymore. "The baby is my heir now," she continued, "my responsibility to raise and guide. Surely you understand family obligation." Missy May appeared beside Ezra at the window, Samuel sleeping peacefully in her arms despite the tension. "What kind of family kills its own children?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "The kind that survives, girl. The kind that understands sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good." Eleanor Hartwell's confession hung in the night air like smoke from a funeral pyre. She had admitted to murder with the casual indifference of someone discussing livestock prices. Her own son, her daughter-in-law, all for money and control. "You have 1 minute to bring me my grandson," Eleanor called out. "After that, Mr. Brennan and his associates will come inside and collect him themselves." Ezra felt Missy May tense beside him. Samuel stirred in her arms but didn't wake. The baby had no idea his fate was being decided by killers in the darkness. But Ezra had spent the last 3 days preparing for this moment. His years as a Union scout had taught him that the best defense often involved turning an enemy's confidence against them. Eleanor Hartwell expected them to cower and surrender. She had no idea what she was really facing. "Mrs. Hartwell," he called back, "before we discuss terms, you should know we sent a letter to Sheriff Morrison yesterday. Told him all about finding the baby and the suspicious circumstances around his parents' death." Eleanor's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Sheriff Morrison is a practical man. He understands how business works in this territory. A few gold coins can make inconvenient letters disappear." "Maybe. But Dr. Gates also has copies. And he's not for sale." The silence that followed lasted longer this time. Ezra could almost hear Eleanor's mind working, calculating new risks she hadn't considered. Men like Brennan were easy to control with money and threats. Respected community members like Dr. Gates presented more complex problems. "You're bluffing," she finally said, but her voice carried less certainty now. Missy May stepped closer to the window, letting Eleanor see her clearly in the moonlight. She held Samuel protectively, but without the desperation Eleanor probably expected. "We also found the letters," Missy May said calmly. This was their gamble. Among Samuel's belongings, hidden in the lining of his blanket, they had discovered several folded papers. Most were too water-damaged to read completely, but enough fragments remained to suggest his mother had been documenting Eleanor's crimes. Eleanor's composure cracked for the first time. "What letters?" "The ones your daughter-in-law wrote. About the missing money from your husband's estate. About Jonathan's suspicions. About why she was really running." "You're lying. Those letters were destroyed in the attack." "Some of them. Not all." Ezra watched Eleanor through his rifle sight as she processed this information. Her face had gone pale in the moonlight, and she was looking around nervously as if expecting more surprises. The truth was, the letters were mostly illegible. But Eleanor didn't know that. Her guilty conscience was filling in the blanks, imagining evidence that might not even exist. "Even if such letters existed," Eleanor said, struggling to regain her authoritative tone, "they would prove nothing. The ravings of a hysterical woman fleeing from Indian attacks. Maybe, but combined with Dr. Gates's medical examination of your son's body, they might raise interesting questions. This was pure invention. Dr. Gates had never examined Jonathan Hartwell's remains. But Eleanor's reaction confirmed that an examination would indeed reveal uncomfortable truths. "Jonathan died of natural causes," she snapped. "Heart failure brought on by excessive drinking. Funny. The undertaker in Millerville said he showed signs of poisoning, something about his fingernails turning blue." Eleanor took an involuntary step backward. Ezra's guess had hit its mark. Her son had been poisoned, probably with something she had administered herself. Cole Brennan moved restlessly in the shadows, clearly uncomfortable with how the conversation was developing. Professional killers preferred straightforward violence to psychological warfare. This was taking too long and getting too complicated. "Mrs. Hartwell," he called out, "maybe we should just finish this and move on." "Shut up," Eleanor hissed, but the damage was done. Her loss of composure revealed the truth about their relationship. Eleanor wasn't just hiring these men. She was dependent on them. Afraid of them. Whatever hold she had over Brennan, it was weaker than she wanted to admit. Hoofbeats echoed across the valley floor, multiple riders approaching fast. Eleanor spun around, her face twisting with alarm. "You didn't," she whispered. Sheriff Morrison emerged from the darkness with 3 deputies. Dr. Gates rode beside them, his medical bag bouncing against his saddle. They formed a loose circle around Eleanor and her hired guns. "Evening, Mrs. Hartwell," the sheriff said pleasantly. "Heard you were having a family reunion out here." Eleanor straightened her dress and composed her features into a mask of wounded dignity. "Sheriff Morrison, thank goodness you're here. These people have kidnapped my grandson. I've been trying to negotiate his safe return." "That's so?" Morrison's tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Dr. Gates here says there might be more to the story. Dr. Gates is mistaken. This is a family matter that doesn't concern local law enforcement. But Brennan was already moving. The hired gun recognized the changing situation and decided to cut his losses. He stepped away from Eleanor, hands visible and empty. "Ma'am," he said to Eleanor, "I think our business arrangement just came to an end." Eleanor's eyes widened in panic. "You can't abandon me now. We had an agreement." Agreement was to collect a baby, not to fight a war with the sheriff's department. Morrison studied the scene with the practiced eye of a lawman who had survived 20 years on the frontier. He could read the dynamics between Eleanor and her hired guns, see the fear barely hidden behind her aristocratic facade. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said quietly, "I think we need to have a conversation in town about your grandson, about your son's death, about why you really came to Redemption Creek." Eleanor Hartwell's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, and everyone present could see it happening. The ride to town happened in tense silence. Eleanor Hartwell sat rigidly in Sheriff Morrison's wagon, her hands cuffed and her face a mask of cold fury. Cole Brennan and his associates rode ahead under deputy escort, already negotiating deals to save their own necks. Ezra and Missy May followed in Dr. Gates's buggy with Samuel sleeping peacefully between them. The baby had no idea his grandmother was a murderer or that his life had been bartered like cattle at market. Sheriff Morrison's office filled quickly once word spread through Redemption Creek. The townspeople had accepted Eleanor as a grieving grandmother searching for her lost family. Learning the truth shattered their assumptions about wealth and respectability. Dr. Gates laid out the evidence methodically. The letters from Samuel's mother, though water-damaged, contained enough legible fragments to paint a clear picture. Eleanor had been embezzling from her late husband's estate for years. When Jonathan discovered the theft, she had poisoned him with arsenic. "Explain the blue fingernails," Morrison said. Eleanor remained silent, but her lawyer wasn't present to advise against self-incrimination. Her aristocratic upbringing had never prepared her for interrogation by frontier lawmen. Cole Brennan proved more talkative once he understood the gallows awaited him otherwise. He described how Eleanor had hired his crew to track down Jonathan's widow and child. The wagon train massacre had been their work, designed to look like an Indian raid. "She wanted it to appear random," Brennan explained. "Didn't want anyone connecting it back to family business." "What about the other passengers?" "Wrong place, wrong time. Mrs. Hartwell said witnesses were complications." The casual way he discussed mass murder chilled everyone in the room. 17 innocent people had died to cover Eleanor's tracks. Men, women, children who had simply been traveling the same route as her daughter-in-law. Missy May held Samuel closer as the details emerged. This tiny baby represented the sole surviving witness to Eleanor's crimes. No wonder she had been so desperate to find him. "What was her plan once she got the child back?" Morrison asked. Brennan shrugged. "Raise him as her heir. Control the family fortune through him until he came of age. Maybe longer if accidents happened." The implication hung heavy in the air. Eleanor would have eventually killed Samuel too once he became old enough to ask uncomfortable questions about his parents' deaths. Dr. Gates produced the final piece of evidence. He had secretly examined Jonathan Hartwell's exhumed remains the week before. The arsenic levels in his hair and fingernails confirmed poisoning. Eleanor's son had died slowly, probably over several months. "Why?" Morrison asked Eleanor directly. She finally spoke, her voice bitter with resentment. "Jonathan was weak. He would have given away everything our family built, the money, the land, the business connections, all of it squandered on foolish sentiment about honesty and moral conduct. So you killed him. I saved the family legacy. Jonathan's son will inherit properly now, guided by someone with actual strength and vision." Her complete lack of remorse stunned even the hardened lawmen present. Eleanor Hartwell truly believed she had done the right thing. In her mind, murder was simply good business practice. The legal proceedings moved swiftly once Brennan agreed to testify in exchange for life imprisonment instead of hanging. Eleanor faced multiple charges of murder, conspiracy, and embezzlement. Her vast fortune would be frozen pending resolution of the estate. That left the question of Samuel's future. He has no living relatives, Dr. Gates explained. Eleanor was his only family, and she's facing execution. What happens to orphans in cases like this? Missy May asked. Usually the state takes custody, places them in orphanages until suitable families can be found. The thought of Samuel in some distant institution, raised by strangers who knew nothing of his story, made Missy May's chest ache. This child had already lost so much. His parents, his inheritance, his birthright. Now he might lose the only stability he had ever known. There is another option, Morrison said carefully. The territorial courts sometimes allow informal adoption in special circumstances, especially when the adopting parties have demonstrated exceptional care and judgment. Ezra looked at Missy May, seeing hope bloom in her eyes. They had risked their lives to protect Samuel. They had chosen his welfare over potential reward money. They had exposed a murderer and saved him from a lifetime of manipulation and eventual assassination. We'd like to adopt him legally, Missy May said firmly. The courts might object to an interracial adoption, Dr. Gates warned. Samuel's been drinking my milk for 2 weeks, Missy May replied. Far as nature's concerned, I'm already his mother. Morrison nodded slowly. I'll recommend it to the territorial judge. Given the circumstances and your conduct throughout this affair, I believe he'll approve the arrangement. The reward money came from an unexpected source. The territorial government offered substantial compensation for exposing Eleanor's crimes and preventing future murders. The sum was large enough to buy good land and build a proper home. More importantly, the way Ezra and Missy May had handled the crisis earned them respect throughout Redemption Creek. Their dignity under pressure, their strategic thinking, and their obvious devotion to Samuel's welfare impressed even those who might normally harbor prejudices. You two make fine parents, Dr. Gates told them as they prepared to leave town. That boy is lucky to have found you. But Ezra and Missy May knew the truth was more complex. They had all found each other at exactly the moment when each needed saving. Samuel had given them purpose beyond their individual grief. Their care had given him life and safety. Together, they had created something stronger than the sum of their separate parts. A family forged not by blood, but by choice and love and shared sacrifice. 6 months later, the sound of hammering echoed across the valley as Ezra added the final touches to their new barn. The territorial judge had approved Samuel's adoption 3 weeks after Eleanor Hartwell's execution. The reward money had purchased 160 acres of good land with a creek running through it. Samuel crawled across the wooden floor of their expanded house, babbling happily as he chased after a wooden toy horse Dr. Gates had carved for him. At 10 months old, he was healthy and strong, with bright eyes that lit up whenever he saw Ezra or Missy May. Papa, he said clearly, reaching toward Ezra as he entered for the midday meal. The word still made Ezra's chest tight with unexpected joy. He had never imagined hearing it again after losing his first family. Samuel didn't know he was adopted. To him, Ezra and Missy May were simply the parents who had always been there. Missy May emerged from the kitchen carrying a pot of stew and fresh bread. She wore a new blue dress, purchased with money earned from selling eggs and vegetables to the growing town of Redemption Creek. Her face had lost the hollow look of grief that had defined her when they first met. Mrs. Patterson ordered 6 more quilts for her boarding house, she announced. Says mine are the finest she's ever seen. The quilting business had started by accident. Missy May needed something to occupy her hands during Samuel's naps, so she had begun sewing scraps into patterns. Word of her skill spread quickly through town. Now she had more orders than she could fill. Ezra's own reputation had grown as well. His military experience and natural leadership made him valuable to other settlers facing problems with land disputes or dangerous wildlife. Sheriff Morrison often asked his advice on tracking criminals through difficult terrain. The Hendersons want me to help them scout that northern valley for their cattle ranch, Ezra said as they ate. 3 days' work for good pay. We can manage here. Samuel and I have plenty to keep us busy. Their partnership had evolved into something deeper over the months. They worked together with the easy rhythm of people who understood each other's strengths and weaknesses. Ezra handled the physical demands of ranch life, while Missy May managed their finances and built relationships with townspeople. The marriage proposal had come naturally one evening as they sat on their porch watching Samuel play in the garden. No dramatic declarations or elaborate ceremonies, just a quiet agreement that they belonged together permanently. "Makes it legal," Ezra had said simply. "Makes it real," Missy May had replied. They were married by Dr. Gates, who had become ordained specifically to perform the ceremony. Sheriff Morrison served as witness, along with half the population of Redemption Creek. Even some of the white families attended, their initial prejudices overcome by respect for the couple's character. Now Samuel Cole Washington was growing up in a world where his parents were valued members of the community. The general store owner asked Ezra's opinion on business matters. The schoolteacher sought Missy May's advice on dealing with difficult children. They were invited to town celebrations and church socials. It hadn't happened overnight. Some residents still harbored suspicious or resentful attitudes. But the way Ezra and Missy May had exposed Eleanor Hartwell's crimes had forced even skeptics to acknowledge their intelligence and moral courage. "Takes character to do what they did," Sheriff Morrison had told anyone who would listen. Could have taken the money and run. Instead, they risked everything to see justice done. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed man in his 50s rode up to their house in an expensive buggy. He introduced himself as Thomas Hartwell, Eleanor's surviving brother-in-law from Philadelphia. "I came to see my great-nephew," he explained, "and to thank you for protecting him." Ezra and Missy May exchanged glances. They had wondered if other family members might eventually appear to claim Samuel. Legal adoption provided some protection, but wealth and influence could challenge even court decisions. Thomas seemed to read their concerns. "I'm not here to take him away. Eleanor destroyed enough of this family already. The boy belongs with people who actually love him." He had come primarily to ensure Samuel would inherit his rightful share of the Hartwell fortune once he reached adulthood. Eleanor's crimes had invalidated her control over the estate, leaving Thomas as the executor. "The money will be held in trust until he's 21, Thomas explained. "But there's enough to pay for his education, medical care, anything he needs." "We can provide for him," Ezra said firmly. "I'm sure you can. But why should you bear the entire burden? This is his inheritance, not charity." Thomas stayed for 3 days, observing how Samuel interacted with his adoptive parents. He watched Ezra teach the boy to feed chickens and Missy May sing lullabies at bedtime. He saw a child who was genuinely loved and cared for. "He's fortunate," Thomas told them before leaving. "Most children born into wealth never experience this kind of genuine affection." The visit validated what Ezra and Missy May already knew. They had given Samuel something more valuable than money or social status. They had given him a real family. As autumn arrived, they hosted their first harvest celebration. Friends and neighbors gathered to help bring in crops and share the bounty. Samuel toddled between the adults, collecting hugs and treats from everyone present. Dr. Gates lifted the boy onto his shoulders and pointed toward the horizon. "See all that land, Samuel? Someday you'll understand how lucky you are to grow up here." But Ezra and Missy May knew the truth was more complex. Luck had brought them together in desperate circumstances. Love had made them a family. Hard work and moral courage had earned them a place in the community. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching Samuel play with wooden blocks, Missy May leaned against Ezra's shoulder. "Think he'll remember any of this when he's grown? Maybe not the details, but he'll remember being loved." The baby, who had nearly died in the desert, was now a thriving toddler with a secure future. The broken man and grieving woman had found healing in caring for him. Together, they had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy.